Welcome. I am delighted to see so many people online tonight because you're taking steps to improve your own health. I'm not happy that there's so many people online tonight because that means you're probably not sleeping well. But hopefully by the end of the hour, you will have a lot more information to help you get a better night's sleep. This is a subject I love talking about because sleep is really important. It's really interesting. And as we all know, you feel like a new person after a good night's sleep. And conversely, you don't feel great if you're not sleeping well, especially on an ongoing basis. So let us get going. There'll be a roughly 45 to 50 minutes worth of information and then time for questions afterwards. We don't have a live question feature, but if you have one as we go along, feel free to type it into the chat or Q&A area, and I will do my best to get to as many of those questions as possible at the end of the presentation. And well, without further ado, let's get going. And this is a topic that I find fascinating because everybody has to sleep and everybody should sleep every night. And it's something that can really affect the quality of life. And there are lots of ways to sleep better. And so I'm hoping to share with you some really practical information that may help you sleep better even tonight. So say a little bit about insomnia. It says 10 to 15% of Canadians have insomnia. I wonder if it's higher than that. Certainly, if on occasion, everybody has had a bad night's sleep for one reason or another. But even if it is just 10 to 15% of Canadians, that's between 2.2 and 3.7 million people, which is remarkable. At the end of the day, that stat doesn't matter so much. The fact that we have over 200 people online tonight suggests that this is an issue that people are looking for help for. And this stat of insomnia means that people aren't getting enough sleep quantity or quality. There are a lot of complications of not getting a good night's sleep. I won't go into those because chances are if you're not sleeping well, just getting a better night's sleep is motivation in and of itself. You don't have to hear the effects that it's having, long-term insomnia on your health. But it is very important for our psychological well-being, our brain function, as I'll talk about, our metabolic well-being, as well as just having energy for the day ahead. Okay, so there are different types of insomnia. Now, I know it says poll here, but we don't have a poll function that we can use. I do apologize about that, but if you can sort of try to, do the poll in your head here, there are different categories or ways you can break down or define or describe your sleep troubles. One is called sleep onset insomnia. So that is difficulty getting to sleep. That's one type of insomnia. Then there's sleep maintenance, which is difficulty staying asleep. Now you can have one or the other or both or a mix of these types of insomnias. So difficulty getting to sleep, difficulty staying asleep. Terminal insomnia, that sounds bad because it sounds like it's going to kill you, but it won't. This means difficulty staying asleep at the end of the night. So waking up too early, maybe you're waking up at 4:35 or 5:30 when your alarm's not going off till 7 and you can't get back to sleep. So that's end of the night or terminal insomnia. Then there's mixed. I think a lot of people have mixed insomnia, which is sometimes you have difficulty getting to sleep and or staying asleep. Some people are waking every 2 hours. Some people are waking only at 3 a.m. And then there's something called comorbid insomnia. That means the insomnia is secondary to another condition or disease, or even a medication that you're taking. So for example, sleep apnea is something that can interfere with people's sleep. Certain types of medications, if you're on any kind of prescription medication, do speak to your pharmacist. Some very common ones like beta blockers, ACE inhibitors, antidepressants, these things can interfere with your sleep. Any kind of prescription, do speak to your pharmacist about whether that can affect your sleep. Pain is another condition that can keep you up at night. So this is a type of comorbid insomnia because it's the pain that's keeping you up. So I'm mostly here to talk about, the first three types and then, mixed insomnia. So difficulty getting asleep, staying asleep, or possibly waking too early. We'll talk about those things. There are lots of benefits of getting a good night's sleep. It helps to recharge the body and mind. Literally, we make a lot of the energy that we need for the day while we're sleeping at night. I'll talk a little bit more about that later. It helps to improve productivity, concentration, helps us to process memories, helps with learning, the learning process, as well as forgetting things you don't need to remember, helps reduce stress, improve immune system, maintain a healthy weight. If you have a shortened duration of sleep, you will tend to eat more calories the day after. That's an established phenomenon. If you have a shortened duration of sleep, you tend to have higher cortisol levels the next day, which can lead to weight gain and stress issues. So that's important. Improving mental health, reducing inflammation, lowering your risk of chronic disease, helps support aging, longevity, and you clean your brain during sleep. I will talk about that later. It's super, super interesting. But for anybody who has issues or concerns about cognitive health, as I do, because my dad had Alzheimer's, then this is an important thing to be aware of. Why do we need to sleep? Or more accurately, why do we get tired at the end of the day? There are reasons for this. Of course, we know that there's a circadian rhythm. Melatonin goes up at the end of the day. That makes us sleepy. I'll talk about that shortly. But ultimately, one of the major things that happens during sleep is that we replenish our energy. Cellular energy, the energy that literally keeps us going, keeps you breathing, talking, moving, living, what keeps you alive and going is something called ATP, adenosine triphosphate. So here's a picture of ATP here. It's the orange two-part molecule, the part of the molecule there, the adenosine is an orange. And then that's attached to these three green phosphate bits. So that's ATP. And when those phosphates pop off, they release energy. And this is happening trillions of times every second all throughout the body. And that's what keeps us going. But as the energy is burned and those phosphates pop off, eventually you get a buildup of that orange part of the molecule, the adenosine. And it's the buildup of adenosine that makes us feel sleepy. That's literally what makes us tired. And so once you have enough adenosine, it overwhelms your system and you have to sleep. And then overnight is when the majority of the adenosine gets transferred back. Phosphates get stuck onto it. And in the morning, you should wake up with more energy if you've had a good night's sleep. So this is partly why we feel more tired as the day goes on, partly why we need to sleep to restore our energy. A fun fact is that caffeine has a similar structure to adenosine, and it will go into our adenosine receptors and block those receptors so we don't feel tired. That's why you feel less tired when you have caffeine. It's not that caffeine is giving you energy. Caffeine is blocking the feeling of tiredness. And so that's why often when caffeine wears off, you can kind of crash because you're way more tired probably than you were before you had the coffee. So just interesting in terms of how caffeine works. I'm not, totally against coffee. Fresh brewed coffee is a great source of antioxidants, but certainly not too late in the day. We'll talk about that a little bit later. So anyway, that's why we get tired as the day goes on. Here is another fancy graph that shows that as the day goes on, as that green bit gets bigger, sleep pressure or feeling tired, the desire to sleep, gets more. That's that buildup of adenosine. There's also a normal circadian rhythm of a sleepiness. This is this wavy line that you can see. Well, it decreases as the night goes on when we sleep. It's at its lowest at 10 o'clock in the morning. Most people should be at their perkiest, most alert at 10 a.m. But then there's a bit of a sleep pressure that gradually increases to mid-afternoon. And so it's not uncommon to feel sleepy around 1 or 2 p.m. Some, cultures have siesta at that time of day. There's a bit of a dip in the body temperature, and that can make you feel a bit sleepy. So if your sleep quality is good, there is not a problem, and you have the luxury of doing so, there isn't a problem. It's not inherently problematic to have a short nap. By short, I mean less than 20 minutes. If you go longer than 20 minutes, you get into a deep phase of sleep that can potentially mess you up the night. But a short nap early in the afternoon is in keeping with the body's circadian rhythm. Then another thing that happens, so I mentioned, the adenosine builds up as the day goes on. That's partly why we feel tired. But as most people know, we have a daily or a nightly increase in melatonin, which is our natural sleep hormone. So let's say a few things about that. So melatonin is a hormone produced by the pineal gland, a small gland in the middle of our brain. And this is the production of melatonin is stimulated by darkness, and it is inhibited by light. And so our melatonin production tends to start or kick in. I mean, this will change a little bit depending on the time of year, but around 8 p.m., your melatonin levels will start to increase, and your melatonin levels, all things being equal, and if this system is working properly, it can change. Melatonin starts around 8 p.m. and it will gradually increase until about 3 a.m. 3 to 4 to 5, your melatonin levels can potentially still be in a high range, but then they will drop off as the night finishes, so you can start to wake up. And melatonin, it peaks later in the night, again, that 3 to 5 a.m. time. That's associated with dream sleep. And so melatonin is a very important component of our sleep system, and it tends to decline with age, which is something that can potentially affect our sleep levels and why people sleep less with age. So for some people, melatonin supplements can be very helpful for sleep, not for everybody. I recognize that, and we'll talk about that later. But there is this daily rhythm of melatonin. There are, like I said, there's a number of things that can interfere with our melatonin production. They just gradually decline with age. Certain medications, as I mentioned, that interfere with sleep, a lot of them interfere with melatonin production, beta blockers, SSRIs, even NSAIDs. Too much alcohol and or caffeine later in the day. Do not underestimate the effect that caffeine has on your sleep. If you're sleeping poorly, no caffeine after 3 p.m. at the latest. Some people, depending on how much caffeine and what's going on, possibly even noon. And if you don't think you can get through the afternoon without caffeine, then you might have to reset, adjust. I'll give you some tips on that. Blue light from electronic devices, the blue light that we look at on screens, TVs, laptops, phones, especially at nighttime, it sends a message to your pineal gland that the sun is shining into your eyes. And so that's not great for your sleep, for your melatonin production or sleep quality. And of course, shift work and jet lag will interfere with when the body is producing melatonin. And that little graph there just shows that our melatonin tends to be very high as kids and peaks as young children, and then gradually decreases as we age. So in addition to helping us sleep, melatonin plays a really important role in our energy production. So one of the things that melatonin does is it goes into the mitochondria, which are the energy producing centers, the batteries, the engines, the powerhouses. This is where the ATP is created. Melatonin acts like an antioxidant in the mitochondria. Melatonin helps increase ATP production. This is one way that we make more energy when we're sleeping, and why, if you've had a good night's sleep, you should feel like you've got more energy the next day. And it does all kinds of other interesting things, but it's really good for our mitochondria, which is good then for brain health and overall energy. Okay, so I said I was going to share 6 tips for a sleep reset, and I believe there will be a handout that we can download at the end. Carla is online. I don't want to take a poll about Teams right now. Oh, Carla said, thank you, Carla, that she will put the handout in the chat area at the end of the presentation. So you'll be able to download a copy of the notes. I know lots of people just take screenshots. That's fine too. But if you want a handout, it is also coming. Okay, so 6 tips to sleep better for a better night's sleep. Why won't my slides advance? There we go. Okay, tip number 1 is actually lots of tips because tip number 1 is about sleep hygiene. So sleep hygiene is not taking a shower before bed. Sleep hygiene is all the things we can do naturally in terms of habits, lifestyle habits that help optimize our natural circadian rhythm in terms of lots of melatonin at night. And then that goes away and you get some cortisol in the morning to get up and going. And that goes away so you can get more melatonin the next night. So here are the sleep hygiene tips. You've probably heard some of these, but I'm doing my due diligence. I have to share these. So trying as much as possible to go to sleep and wake up at the same time every day. I know that sounds boring, but that's sort of part of the point. The circadian rhythm likes boring routine. So same sleep and wake times. Sleep in a completely dark room if you can get blackout blinds. If not, try a sleep mask to cover your eyes because, again, melatonin is stimulated by darkness and it's inhibited by light. So even we don't completely close our eyes when we're sleeping. Often they can be open, just little slits. So any little lights coming in from the room, whether it's gadgets, your neighbors, very bright porch lights, everybody's switching to those blue LED lights, right? That are ghostly. So sleep mask or blackout blinds. On the flip side, look at natural light as soon as you can when you wake up in the morning. It's easier at this time of year. Usually you can just open the blind and see some light. If not, or if it's the wintertime, flick on the lights. So try to look at light as soon as you can wake up in the morning. That helps shut off the residual melatonin if there's any still there to get you going in the day. As I said, don't underestimate caffeine. Number 4, avoid caffeine after noon if you're really having sleep problems. Avoid screens near bedtime. We covered that. Eat clean and stay hydrated. Exercise regularly. Exercise is really helpful and helps to improve sleep quality. And connecting with nature as well does help to improve sleep quality. Also, you might want to consider a white noise machine. You don't have to buy a separate machine for that, but a fan or an air filter or something that makes a humming noise, can really be helpful. Some people and studies suggest, and some people report it really helps. I certainly really love my white noise machine. And again, check with your pharmacist. This also, I think, comes under sleep hygiene if you're on any prescription medications to see if they could be interfering with your sleep. Okay, so that's tip number 1, is all those tips about sleep hygiene. Next is, let us understand the blood sugar roller coaster. Many people, even if they have not been diagnosed with diabetes, can have blood sugar that fluctuates up and down quite extensively all day long. So here's an example. This is a 24-hour glucose monitor, CGM, continuous glucose monitor readout. And this individual had their fasting blood work done at about 6 a.m. where you see, I don't know if you see where my pointer is, but the second little blue circle here. And their fasting blood work looked nice and low, very healthy. But in fact, the continuous glucose monitor showed that this person's blood sugar skyrocketed into diabetic levels, half a dozen times during the day. And when blood sugar drops very quickly, there's a few things that happen. First of all, one of the things that can happen is your body will produce adrenaline. That's an emergency blood sugar raising tactic to get your blood sugar back up. It can also affect the way your brain works. It can drive cravings, especially in the evening, that sweet tooth at nighttime. I'm not going to get into that right now because we're going to focus on sleep. Here's a more dramatic example of somebody who, she doesn't feel like eating in the morning, so she skips breakfast at 11 o'clock, has coffee and donuts. Her blood sugar skyrockets up and it's up and down all day long. But what I want to show your attention to is the very first peak you see in her blood sugar is actually, it ramps up while she's sleeping, starting at about 1 in the morning. And then at 3 a.m., it bottoms out and it drops so fast that she wakes up wide awake at around 3. So I know a lot of people wake up around 3 o'clock. There are a couple of reasons for that, but this can be a big one, especially if you feel particularly like alert, like you're not going back to sleep. You're thinking, what do I do to get up? Should I read? Should I vacuum? Should I whatever? It could very well be that this is what is waking you up. So balancing blood sugar, as counterintuitive, this may not be what you expected to hear coming to a webinar on insomnia, but it is something that can make a big difference. for people in terms of sleep. There are other reasons you might be waking up around 3 a.m. If you're perimenopausal, low progesterone can also have a similar type of sleep disturbance. And so for perimenopausal women who are struggling with sleep, everything I'm going to talk about tonight will still be helpful, but you might want to see either a naturopathic doctor or another practitioner who can prescribe bioidentical progesterone. You get your hormones tested. If the progesterone is low, that can make a real difference in sleep as well. But back to blood sugar, because this is helpful and important for everyone. That balancing your blood sugar, as you can see in the CGM on the right from the same person when she was able to balance her blood sugar out through better food choices, exercise, having more fiber, fat, protein at each meal, get the blood sugar very, very stable, and then sleeping through the night. So things you can do to balance your blood sugar, avoid the foods that make your blood sugar spike. The white foods, white flour, white sugar, a lot of the foods, especially in the beginning of the day that we think of as breakfast foods, muffins, pancakes, bagels, donuts, spikes your blood sugar, and then, it's like that for the rest of the day. So protein, fat, and fiber at each meal, especially breakfast, aiming for 35 grams of fiber each day. And if you feel like you're not getting in enough, then consider like a soluble fiber supplement, for example. All right. Next, I already mentioned this, but I have to mention it again. It's important enough to be its own step. Step 3, which is exercise. Exercise improves sleep quality. Exercise also helps you make more mitochondria, which makes better cellular energy, which helps your circadian rhythm. There's all kinds of good things. Any kind of movement is better than no movement. Don't try to, try not to work out too late at night because that could interfere with your sleep. Getting out especially is helpful. Exposure to sunlight, it helps with circadian rhythm and sleep quality, but get moving is an important part of sleeping better. Okay, let's say I just want to say a couple of words about sleep and stress. Everybody knows that you won't sleep well if you're under stress, right? Brain's going, the stress hormones do interfere. Your cortisol is too high, and that throws off then you being able to produce melatonin, and sleep can really be affected by this. Basically, poor sleep raises your cortisol levels and cholesterol. Poor sleep raises cortisol levels, and high cortisol interferes with sleep. It just sort of goes back and forth. And so we know in times of stress, the body upregulates our HPA axis, hypothalamus, pituitary, the connection between the brain and the adrenal glands. We end up with more cortisol, and this inhibits the production of melatonin. Melatonin is especially important for REM, the rapid eye movement, or our dream sleep later in the night, as I mentioned. And so that can really interfere with our emotional well-being. I'll talk a little bit about stages of sleep later on. Okay, so step number 4 in terms of getting a better night's sleep is trying to combat stress. Now, fortunately, almost all these tips in terms of combating stress are pretty much the same ones I've already mentioned in terms of getting a better night's sleep. So eating a healthier diet, whole foods, avoiding the processed foods, regular meals, not skipping meals, protein-rich and fiber meals, decreasing caffeine, alcohol, all this is good for stress and sleep. Physical movement. Now, if you are burnt out or on the verge of burning out, it's not the time to try, training for a marathon. So yoga, walking, these kinds of things, something more relaxing, perhaps, walking in the woods, relaxation exercises, mindfulness, slowing down, optimizing your nutrient intake. This is really important when you're under stress. We sometimes think under stress, okay, I'm just going to eat whatever because I'm too stressed out to think about cooking. But if you can change your mind on that and think, you know what, I'm under stress. This is a time for self-care and nourishing myself to get through the stress. That even if it's just a healthier snack or, swapping in some, a handful of nuts instead of chips, those kinds of things can make a difference with your nutrient intake. So we want to get more Bs, vitamins when we're under stress. All the Bs are important, especially vitamin B5. Sometimes you've seen B complexes that are called like stress tabs, for example, or stress complex. That's because we need this. Vitamin D, vitamin C, super important when you're under stress. Vitamin C helps with their production of stress hormones and collagen, not to mention our immune system. So if you've been under stress, you know somebody who looks stressed out, because your body will take all of your vitamin C and make stress hormones with it. And if there's not enough left for collagen, you will look stressed after you've been under stress. So lots of vitamin C is helpful. Omega-3 essential fatty acids and magnesium is so important. I will mention it more later. Okay. If you are not sure if you're stressed, I really like this, the adrenal stress test at Women's Sense magazine, womensense.com/stress test. You can take the adrenal stress test, or the stress test, basically. This is the online stress quiz, and see what you get. Okay, what if you are under stress? I'm going to mention one adaptogen. Let me back up. I had this here as number 6. Sixth thing you can do, support the adrenal glands and help to regulate the HPA, so the connection between the brain and the adrenal glands, the axis, with adaptogens. So adaptogens are herbs that help us to adapt to or cope with stress. There are a number of them. Siberian ginseng, ashwagandha is a top one. Rhodiola is another one. There's lots of them that really help you cope with stress better. So adaptogens help our adrenal glands produce the right amounts of stress hormones at the right times of the day. So you're getting that bump in cortisol in the morning when you need to get up and going, and then it goes down so your melatonin can come up later in the day, and help that happen on a normal daily rhythm. So there are lots of wonderful adaptogens. One I will call out here because it is adaptogen that also happens to help with sleep, which is not typical for adaptogens. A lot of adaptogens will give you energy. Ashwagandha helps with this, but the name ashwagandha withania somnifera, it's the somni part in it that speaks to the fact that this is a herb that has been used for thousands of years in Ayurvedic, so Indian traditional medicine, as a healthy aging herb, helping to deal with stress and anxiety, helping to increase your resilience in the face of stress, but also helping with sleep quality. There's been a lot about this online lately, people talking about ashwagandha for sleep. Some people really swear by it. And so ashwagandha can be taken during the day as a typical adaptogen to help us cope with the daily demands and stress, but it can also can be taken at night. And studies show that people who took ashwagandha at night help them fall asleep faster, improve sleep quality, increase total time spent asleep, and less time to fall asleep. So less time spent awake in bed. So it's 1 capsule daily, but again, if you want that for sleep support, you can take that capsule at bedtime. Okay, so that is one ashwagandha, one adaptogen, ashwagandha, that I'm calling out for sleep. Okay, next, tip number 5. I mentioned with the nutrients with regards to stress that magnesium is so important, that is getting its own tip. It is tip number 5. In terms of nutritional support for stress and sleep, magnesium is so overlooked. We often don't get enough magnesium in our diets. And specifically, we know magnesium is helpful for muscle health, supporting and preventing muscle cramps and twitches and spasms. But magnesium also helps to improve sleep quality, especially when it's taken at nighttime, providing a nice, calming, relaxing, peaceful sleep quality. Supplementation with magnesium studies show helps to improve insomnia scores. So that's just measures or markers of insomnia. Sleep efficiency, sleep time, how much time spent to sleep, sleep onset latency, which means faster getting to sleep, improvements in early morning awakenings, reducing that, and improvements in melatonin levels. So lots of benefits for magnesium when it comes to sleep. I think not a lot of people know or maybe are aware of how much magnesium we need every day just for basic health. So the recommended intake of magnesium for children between 4 and 8 years, 130 milligrams per day. That's for little kids. Adolescents, so 9 to 13 years, not even adolescents, those are like preteens, 240 milligrams per day for, that's the minimum you need for daily health. Males 14 plus, so teens, so adolescents and adults, roughly 400 milligrams, 410 milligrams per day. Females 14 plus, 360 milligrams per day. I think that could potentially be higher. And this is sort of your recommended daily intake. So the minimum amount you need to avoid deficiency. If you're under stress, or if you're a very physically active person, you might need more magnesium. So trying as much as possible to get magnesium from the diet really is helpful for sleep and overall well-being, as well as stress levels. Top foods for magnesium intake include green leafy vegetables. If you were to get in 2 cups of cooked green leafies per day, you'd be approaching 300 milligrams of magnesium. So that's close to your daily intake for women, 3/4 of what men need. I don't know very many people. I struggle with getting in 2 cups of green leafy vegetables every day. But and that's cooked, by the way. Dark chocolate is another good source of magnesium. Nuts and seeds, almonds are very high on the list. So these are some examples or ways of getting in magnesium. If you are having poor sleep quality, taking some magnesium at bedtime, like a magnesium supplement, is very helpful and something to consider. Okay, so let us get into a little bit of sleep anatomy. Okay, what does that mean? Sleep anatomy. When we sleep, there are different things that happen at different parts of the night and different stages in the sleep. As you've probably heard, we sleep in cycles of roughly 90 minutes to 2 hours. So every night, for easy math, let's say 2 hours, we go through a period of different stages of sleep and then repeat it again. And so that happens every 2 hours throughout the night. Those cycles though, and what happens in those cycles changes. So here is something that charts our sleep anatomy. So we start at the top left hand when we're awake, and then at the beginning of the night we fall through different sleep stages. In our very first sleep, actually our first 2 sleep cycles, we spend most of that time down in the deepest phase of sleep called stage 4 sleep. I'll tell you what happens in there. That's a pretty interesting time. Now, as the night goes on, our sleep shifts somewhere after the first 2.5 sleep cycles, somewhere around 3 a.m. The cycles shift to spending more time in light sleep, more time in REM, rapid eye movement, which is the dream sleep, which is why left to your own devices, you will often wake up in the morning from a dream, or you've just had a dream, because that's usually one of the last things that happens before we wake up. Now, the dream sleep, the REM sleep, as I mentioned earlier, this is important for processing memories, learning, forgetting things you need to forget, or you don't need to remember everything, processing emotions. So dream sleep is important for that reason. The beginning of the night, where we're doing this very deep sleep, for a long time, it was a real mystery as to what was happening, if anything, during that time of sleep. We now know something very cool and very important happens at the beginning of the night during stage 4 sleep, and that is when we clean our brains. Not joking you. Neuroscientists now recognize that during this deep 4th stage of sleep, there's a circulatory system, not blood, but cerebral spinal fluid, lymphatic fluid, a little circulatory system that opens up at that time and flushes all the daily metabolic junk that accumulates from normal metabolism, the byproducts of our thinking and brain processes. I guess we can't just clear this out all the time, because it would mess with our ability to think. So this happens only when we are at our deepest stage of sleep. The brain flushes itself. And so this is one reason why you should feel more clear-headed and more focused after you've had a good night's sleep, and why you can feel foggy-headed and unwell after a poor night's sleep, especially if it's the beginning of the night that your sleep is affected. So, insufficient brain clearance leads to waste accumulation in the brain if you're not getting good deep sleep because of any kind of, well, especially a sleep onset, but early in the night types of insomnia. Stress will inhibit this type of sleep. Hypertension will inhibit this circulation, so high blood pressure will do this, as well as high levels of alcohol. Conversely, efficient brain clearance that happens during good stage 4 sleep because you're sleeping well, you have good vascular health, you're exercising regularly, and low levels of alcohol. So really important reason to get that early night deep sleep. Okay, so we've talked about lots of things we can do for sleep, but except for ashwagandha, I haven't really talked about natural sleep aids because the first 5 steps so far are all things you can do to get a better night's sleep. And there are also natural sleep supplements, nutrients, and herbs that can help you get a better night's sleep. And so one of the first ones that comes to mind that's worth discussing is supplemental melatonin. And normally I have a poll question here as to whether you've tried melatonin and if you like it or not. But I know the answer to that is mixed. So for some people, melatonin is just a game changer. It absolutely sorts them out. They feel like $1,000,000. And for other people, they don't. They just feel groggy, headache, hungover, not great the next day. And so if you like melatonin, fantastic, stick with it. Helpful. If you've tried melatonin, with melatonin, the dose really varies per individual. I've seen people who benefit from 0.5 milligram at night to people who take 10 milligrams at night and more. That is such a wide range, but that's how melatonin works. The dosage is highly individualized. A typical dose of melatonin would be between 1 and 3 milligrams per night. But again, you want to start with a small amount and see how you feel. So is melatonin right for everyone? No, but for some people it can really be helpful. So I'm going to show a few supplement options. Some will contain melatonin and some will be melatonin free because I know some people just don't feel great on it. Okay, before I do that, I want to mention one more thing that is related to, I probably should have put this earlier, the stages of sleep, which is that different stages of sleep as well as wakefulness are characterized by different patterns of electrical activity in the brain, so different brain waves. Here's an example. The first line, these deep irregular waves, that's what happens in deep sleep when we're cleaning our brain. Not much, you could argue, not much brain activity there. Then there's the theta waves, the next line, which are smaller in amplitude, more regular, a little more activity. These are our light sleep or dreaming waves. And then the third line is the alpha state. These are like medium amplitude. They're pretty regular, pretty frequent. This is considered to be awake and relaxed, sometimes referred to as the flow state. So when you're awake but focused, concentrating, you don't really notice the passage of time because you're really on it or in it in the moment. And then the bottom line is the beta waves when we're awake and excited. Now, sometimes beta waves are appropriate and we need them, but if you're too stressed out and you're in this beta state too often where you don't have a lot of, it's very little and like a little bit of not a very deep amplitude, but still frequent waves, that's not a helpful brain state for you to be in, except for under certain extreme stressful conditions. So there are things we can do, of course, during the day. If we're promoting the alpha state, you tend to be more calm and focused. And if you can increase those types of brain waves, that helps you transition into the dreaming or sleeping brain waves. So there are certain things we can do to support alpha brain waves during the day or just prior to sleeping. A couple of nutrients. First of all, L-theanine, which was originally identified in green tea, but you don't want to be taking green tea at nighttime because it has caffeine in it. The decaffeinated stuff isn't going to get you much L-theanine. But L-theanine is available on its own in a supplement. You can extract the L-theanine from green tea or actually create it from fermentation. And then GABA, also an amino acid, GABA aminobutyric acid. It is produced in our gut if you have a healthy gut, and it acts on the gut-brain axis to make you feel calm and relaxed. You can get this in certain types of fermented foods, kimchi, as well as sprouted brown rice, but you can also get it in supplements. GABA and L-theanine together, and bear with me because I'll show you the combo shortly, has been shown, and this is a snapshot from a paper showing that a mixture of GABA and L-theanine together decreases sleep latency, means helps you get to sleep faster, and improves non-REM, that deep stage 4 sleep. So if you're having trouble getting to sleep, and or you think you're missing out on deep sleep at the beginning of the night, you're tossing and turning for the first few hours, you're checking the clock, you feel like you're getting to sleep until 2 a.m. Or if you feel like you're waking every 2 hours, usually means you're waking roughly between your sleep cycles, then consider a combination that has GABA and L-theanine in it. So for example, here is the nighttime magnesium bisglycinate. This is a combination that comes either in powder or capsules, has GABA, L-theanine, as well as a small amount of melatonin and magnesium bisglycinate. So you get your magnesium, GABA, L-theanine, and a little bit of melatonin. In the powdered version, you can adjust your scoop size. Turn off noise. Adjust your scoop size to control how much of, well, any ingredient you're getting, particularly the melatonin. I like this combination because it has the magnesium, GABA, and L-theanine, and not very much melatonin in it. So most people will find they fall asleep fast, sleep deep, wake up feeling refreshed, not groggy or drowsy. So that's a nice option that does have a little bit of melatonin in it if you've tried that. If not, you can get the L-theanine and GABA on its own and just take those at bedtime if you want melatonin-free combination. Another option in terms of something with relatively low levels or varying levels of melatonin for the people for whom that works is the Tranquil Sleep combination. So this has L-theanine, a very small amount of 5-HTP, which is a nutrient that the body uses to turn into its own melatonin, a precursor molecule, as well as 1.5 milligrams of melatonin per chewable tablet for the regular strength, and then 6 milligrams of melatonin for the extra strength. And so Tranquil Sleep is a combo that I've used personally and professionally for quite a long time, over a decade. That seems to be fast acting. This is take as needed. In other words, if it's one of those nights that you lie down and think, I'm not going to sleep, you can take it then. Or if you know you're on the regular basis, you want to take it, that's fine too. Good for travel. And it's something to consider that has a varying, depending on, you can take 1 or 2 of the either regular or extra strength to customize the amount of sleep supportive nutrients that you're taking. Okay, so those are 2 options that contain, I would say, on the lower side of the melatonin level. There are other higher amounts of melatonin for people who know that that works well for them. There's a new option to the market that is melatonin free. And this is something called Mazenol. It's relatively new to the Canadian market, but has been used in Europe for a long time. So that Mazenol is the ingredient that you'll find here in Peaceful Z's. Mazenol is an extract from young corn leaves. So when corn leaves, up to the time they're sprouting out of the ground, up to the time they're about 12 inches, they have this compound in them called 6-MBOA. And 6-MBOA has a very similar shape in structure to melatonin. It's not melatonin, but it goes into the brain and will connect with melatonin receptors and provide a lot of the effects of melatonin, sleepiness, for example, without necessarily having the side effects that people will associate with melatonin. Now, as with most sleep supplements, the people's reactions to this can vary. The recommended dose on the label based on clinical trials is 2 capsules once daily, 60 minutes prior to bedtime. I'd say, as with most things, start with a half dose, say 1 capsule, and see how you feel. Some people really like the quality of sleep they get with the 6 MBOA, and they feel very good the next day. And so it's just an option, a melatonin-free option for something that connects with melatonin receptors and has some of those benefits. Other studies also show that it promotes a healthy mood balance and it helps to lower excess cortisol levels. So something to consider when you're under stress. So that's a new ingredient, this Peaceful Z's with the Mazenol 6 MBOA. Okay, and then one more completely melatonin-free option, because I like to give some melatonin-free options, is this combination. It was actually formulated by a friend and colleague of mine a number of years ago, which is entirely herbal, and it contains some of the major herbs that have been used historically to treat insomnia, some of the best known sleep herbs, as well as some really smart additions. So contains passion flower and skullcap. These are 2 of the sort of longest tried and true botanical medicines when it comes to sleep. This also contains California poppy, which has a slight sedative effect and a very slight analgesic, pain-relieving effect, and also contains linden. Linden is another sleep herb, and this combination is very gentle, but also very effective. You would take, depending on the individual, between 1 and 4 capsules 1 hour before bedtime and see how you feel with that. But for people who don't like melatonin, this is a really nice option. You can combine this with magnesium. You can take it on its own. A very nice option for sleep. Okay, so there is a look at some in terms of natural sleep solutions. And I think Carla said that she was going to try to put the handout, if possible, in the chat. So we'll see if we can get that to happen. But just as a recap, in terms of melatonin-free options for sleep, you've got ashwagandha, Peaceful Z's, 6 MBOA, the Restful Sleep, and the 3 Brains line with the combination of herbs. And for low to medium melatonin options, 2.5 grams of melatonin, that's actually in the capsules. There's a varying dose, of course. This comes in a powder, which is nice, or the Tranquil Sleep chewable tablets, between 1.5 and 6 milligrams, depending on whether it's the regular or extra strength. So just lots of different options when it comes to sleep. Sometimes you have to try one or 2 things to see what you like. Okay. So one last comment here. Sometimes I get asked, how do I know I'm getting a good natural health product? I showed you a variety of labels, for example. One thing that you can look for somewhere on the label is this Isura symbol, I-S-U-R-A, and a little flower, the verified clean symbol. And Isura is a third-party testing facility that can test for up to 800 different possible contaminants. This goes above and beyond Canadian guidelines. Now, Canadian guidelines are among the strictest in the world. So just buying products that are made in Canada will guarantee you better quality than almost anything you can get produced anywhere else in the world. But even beyond the strict Canadian guidelines, this Isura testing checks for all of these contaminants, making sure the products are non-GMO compliant, contaminant-free, adulterant-free, authenticated, and you're getting exactly what it says on the label, and no surprises.